In the darker shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read ancient tomes, the order of the Abercast. We are the brave and bold.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Stigmata Studios presents The Jinn Jihad. The Jinn Jihad kicks your face with myths, mysteries, epic battles, suicide bombers, quirky characters, and divine power armor. In this epic graphic novel, the warrior archangels descend on a city in chaos. It's all-out war. The non-standard assembly battles an ancient terrorist organization and their ultimate weapon, a corrupted, magically enhanced, unstoppable monster, the Jinn. This graphic novel is a wild ride. It's one part distant Arab myth, one part Old Testament angelic vengeance, and one part unique heroic tough guys. Available on Amazon. Get more info on the Jinn Jihad and other titles at stigmatastudios.com.
Following last summer's conflict in Gaza, the Human Rights Council established a commission of inquiry and selected William Shabbos, a Canadian law professor, to chair the investigation. In February, Mr. Shabbos was forced to resign after documents came to light revealing that in 2012 he had done some consulting work for the Palestine Liberation Organization. Surprisingly, this fact slipped Mr. Shabbos' mind during his vetting process. And it was clear from the outset that Mr. Shabbos was not an impartial arbiter, since he had a record of public statements suggesting that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the former President Shimon Peres would face trial at the International Criminal Court. When Israel protested, however, the United Nations ignored it.
The Abercast. Occult. History. Conspiracy. Violence.
All right, welcome everybody. This is Abercast. Welcome and thank you for tuning in. I feel privileged that you choose to spend this time with me. I'm glad you're joining me here for this little unexpected episode. So let me just talk about this episode for a second. This is not next week's episode. It's coming up late in the week and it's up, but there is going to be an episode 76 out Sunday evening, just like normal. So this is, if you don't like this episode, then just tune in for the next episode, which is like a Christmassy episode. You guys will like it. We talk about we're gonna talk. I'm gonna record it after this, so I gotta really pace myself because I'm planning on doing like 2 hours worth of talking and reading. So I gotta take it easy on these jihads. But this is gonna go up as soon as it can, and then next week's episode will be Sunday evening, just like normal, episode 76. So this is a little bonus episode for you. I want to remind you guys to support the show, rate and review on iTunes. Please spread the disease. If you know, if you are a weirdo that likes the stuff we talk about on this show, then chances are you probably know another weirdo. Tell them about the show. You guys might be able to talk about the weirdo stuff together. The best way to support the show, however, is to pick up some books. It's a great way to remind me or to justify this time that I take in researching and recording, and I don't edit at all. I very rarely do I edit anything. So it's like researching, recording, uploading. It kind of helps me justify spending all the time doing that rather than inking a comic book, which is really what I should be doing all the time, every time, or writing a comic book. So that's the best way to do it. Pick up some books. Go to stigmatastudios.com, yada, yada, yada. Click the comic book link. Pick up some books. I got one brand new one in the Revenge in a Saloon Called Hell. And the Brass City is like, I'm waiting for it because it should be done. While you're at stigmatastudios.com, go up to the upper left-hand corner and check out the social media links there. Drop me a line. Or whatever, go to we got the Facebook page, the Abercast Facebook page. In the show notes, there's a newsletter. So we just go ahead and just immerse yourself into this Stigmataverse over here. We would be happy to bring some bullets, booze, blood, and blasphemy your way. So as we are all getting ready to pull the trigger on Christmas, I would just like to say to have a great and safe holiday season. Remember to plan a ride because, you know, those cops are out there and they are looking for you. So don't give them a chance. Don't do something stupid. Find a taxi cab. Get one of those Ubers, one of those Lyfts. I used to have a Lyft promo password thing that I would give out. I don't even know if it would still work anymore. I can't remember what the fuck it was anyway, so sorry. Maybe I'll try to get a new one. I don't know. You know, trying to look after you guys. You know, you're somewhere, fucking lift it up or Uber it up. Get home safe and sound. So you could tune in next week. But so while we're in this vein, I want to say Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. Have a super Saturnalia, a spectacular solstice, you know, whatever does it for you out there. Just be safe and have some fucking fun and enjoy your family or whatever. I need to really take my own advice into consideration because a lot of times around this time of year, I feel like it's a chore to visit with my family, and I feel like, motherfucker, I'd rather be recording some shit or writing some shit or drawing some shit. I'm kicking rocks like fucking Charlie Brown. But here, that's what I'm working on. I'm working on taking stock of that stuff and just enjoying the fucking people that you're forced to hang out with this time of year. Okay. So it happens from time to time that an Abercast topic becomes relevant in current events. And even though, you know, this show is not a current events podcast or a news podcast, it does mirror, or current events or news sometimes mirrors or highlights or demonstrates a point or part of a story that I had just told or am planning on telling. So this one happened super fast. This is also why it's a bonus episode. You guys don't like this current events stuff, you know, whatever. You can just ease on through, like you're on the whiz. Just ease on down the road. But I think that this is interesting, especially if you guys dug the 6-Day War thing, because that's what all this is about. This episode links directly to episode 73 and 74, which was the 6-Day War episodes. So this one happened fast. We did the 2 episodes on the 1967 Six-Day War, and Jerusalem had been in the news, so I decided to do the 6-Day War in the first place. But I did the story as a military history kind of thing. One of the amazing parts of that story to me is how the UN was kind of complicit in the failed invasion of Israel when Egypt and Syria told the UN peacekeepers to scramola. This was like the first UN peacekeeping mission. It's kind of like the reason they were around at this point in time was to keep these kids in separate corners of the ring. You know what I'm saying? So Egypt and Syria like ducked in and they were like, yo, UN peacekeepers, fucking get out of here. And he was like, well, I can't make that decision, but I'll pass it up to the Secretary General and see what he has to say. You know, they'll have to go through the Security Council and all that stuff. And the guy's like, you got 2 fucking days to get out of here. So he sent it. He sent the order or the request or whatever it was to the Secretary General. And I just remember marveling. I mean, you guys might remember it too. Like, you just probably listened to this fucking episode. But I was just marveled at that the Secretary General unilaterally, without involving the Security Council or anybody, just said, okay, yeah, you're right, get out of there, get the fuck out of there, opening up, just basically unlocking and opening the door for Egypt and Syria to invade Israel. So when I was telling the story, I stopped real short of saying that the UN was anti-Israeli. I didn't want to say anti-Semite. I stopped real short at saying that. I think I kind of like erred more on the side of incompetence or cowardice, maybe, rather than just straight up like they hate the Jews. But this is not last week's show right now. So what I want you to do is I want you to pour yourself a drink. Make it a big old gin jihad. Pour it big and long and cold. Because it's cold gin time again. You know I will always win. A little kiss for you guys. Because tonight we're going to be talking about, I don't know what I'm going to name this yet, because I got a lot of stuff to bump through before I write it on the show notes, but right now I'm tentatively calling it the Anti-Israeli United Nations or the United Nations War on Israel. I'm not sure. So anyhow, that's what this show is going to be about. So, yeah, hold on. So we're going to get into it right now. All right, so last week Trump announced that he was going to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Bill Clinton claimed that he was going to do this when he campaigned. W claimed that he was going to do this when he campaigned. Obama said that he was going to do this when he campaigned, and no one ever did. This is the way to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Like, we can't trust them to make their own... Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. But everybody's tiptoeing like, oh, I don't want to validate that. I don't want to rile up these crazy Muslims. So when he announced it, Hollywood, fucking Facebook, Twitter, liberals in general, CNN, MSNBC, predictably, all of these people started freaking the fuck out. And, also, everyone, the Palestinians and everyone, they're like, oh, we're going to have 3 days of rage. Fuck that. And I'm like, what's different from your 3 days of rage to your just regular 3 days? Like, I don't know. Everyone's always protesting and burning flags and yabble over there all the time. Like, no one can ever just fucking relax, it seems like. Anyhow, whatever, who cares, right? Like, what's new? Everyone's always, like, Trump could have been like, hey, I'm just going to take the day off and take a big dump, and all those people would fucking freak out. Hollywood would be like, he's going to take a dump, what? I mean, whatever. I don't know why he would say he's going to take a dump. I didn't really think that this through. It's not on the notes. It's not part of the fucking talk, okay? The UN scheduled a vote to condemn this action. Now remember, the United States of America is a sovereign country. The UN is here because we kind of build a building for them and we give them a fucking shitload of money all the time. We'd probably better off as a planet if we just turn that fucking into a parking lot and got these people out of the fucking country. Be like, go form your Legion of Doom somewhere else. Will you please? The Legion of Doom. Remember, they can't stop this. They can vote and condemn it all they want. They're never going to be able to stop it. We put our embassies wherever the fuck we want. But they're like, let's waste a bunch of time and a bunch of money and just freak everybody out by, we're just going to vote on if you could do this. And there are people on Facebook that are like, yeah, they voted against it. We're not going to be able to do it. Yeah, rock on, UN. And I'm just like, civics class, and everybody fucking needs to listen to the show. Just fucking listen to the show. They can't stop this. These idiots on Facebook are wrong. They're just voting to show their dicks, is what I said. So on December 18th, in a Security Council meeting, so this was before the vote, U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley took some time to say this. Where is it at? Oh, you gotta press this button here.
Make statements. I give the floor to the United States.
It's our floor,
Thank
bitch.
you,
We'll
Mr.
just take it whenever we
President.
want. Thank you.
In this meeting, I will not use Council's time to address where a sovereign nation might decide to put its embassy, and why we have every right to do so. I will address a more appropriate and urgent concern. This week marks the one-year anniversary of the passage of Resolution 2334. On that day in this Council in December 2016, the United States elected to abstain, allowing the measure to pass. Now it's 1 year and a new administration later. Given the chance to vote again on Resolution 2334, I can say with complete confidence that the United States would vote no. We would exercise our veto power. The reasons why are very relevant to the cause of peace in the Middle East. On the surface, Resolution 2334 described Israeli settlements as impediments to peace. Reasonable people can disagree about that, and in fact, over the years, the United States has expressed criticism of Israeli settlement policies many times. But in truth, it was Resolution 2334 itself that was an impediment to peace. This Security Council put the negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians further out of reach by injecting itself yet again in between the two parties to the conflict. By misplacing the blame for the failure of peace efforts squarely on the Israeli settlements, the resolution gave a pass to Palestinian leaders who for many years rejected one peace proposal after another. It also gave them encouragement to avoid negotiations in the future. It refused to acknowledge the legacy of failed negotiations unrelated to settlements. And the Council passed judgment on issues that must be decided in direct negotiations between the parties. If the United Nations history in the peace efforts proves anything, it is that talking in New York cannot take place of face-to-face negotiations between the regional parties. It only sets back the cause of peace, not advance it. As if to make this very point, Resolution 2334 demanded a halt to all Israeli settlement activity in East Jerusalem, even in the Jewish quarter of the Old City. This is something that no responsible person or country would ever expect Israel would do. And in this way, Resolution 2334 did what President Trump's announcement on Jerusalem as the capital of Israel did not do. It prejudged issues that should be left in final status negotiations. Given the chance today, the United States would veto Resolution 2334 for another reason. It gave new life to an ugly creation of the Human Rights Council, the database of companies operating in Jewish communities. This is an effort to create a blacklist, plain and simple. It is yet another obstacle to a negotiated peace. It is a stain on America's conscience that we gave the so-called BDS movement momentum by allowing the passage of Resolution 2334. To the United Nations' shame, this has been a disproportionately hostile place for the Middle East's most enduring democracy. The United States refuses to accept the double standard that says we are not impartial when we stand by the will of the American people by moving our U.S. Embassy. But somehow the United Nations is a neutral party when it consistently singles out Israel for condemnation. For decades, Israel has withstood wave after wave of bias in the UN and its agencies. The United States has often stood beside Israel. We did not on December 23, 2016. We will not make that mistake again. This week marks the one-year anniversary of a significant setback for Middle East peace. But the United States has an undiminished commitment to helping bring about final status negotiations that will lead to lasting peace. Our hand remains extended to both parties. We call on all countries that share this commitment to learn the hard lessons of the past and work to bring Israel and the Palestinian people in good faith to the peace table. Thank you very much.
Okay, so what did she just say? It sounded to me like she was like, shots fired! Warning, shots fired! So she was the only one voting for this. Like, in the whole UN, America was the only one voting to not condemn the U.S. for whatever. So what happens is for some reason there's like a point of procedure where she's the only one, so she gets time, but instead of being in front of the Security Council, she gets time in the General Assembly to address the whole General Assembly. And she is awesome, you guys. So here we go. This one, I'm going to break it up, but this is all one big video. You could just YouTube Nikki Haley December 18th for the last one if you want to check that out again, or for this video, this half of video and the next half of video, you could just YouTube search Nikki Haley December 21st. So this was her yesterday.
To its shame, the United Nations has long been a hostile place for the state of Israel. Both the current and the previous Secretary Generals have objected to the UN's disproportionate focus on Israel. It's a wrong that undermines the credibility of this institution, and that in turn is harmful for the entire world. I've often wondered why, in the face of such hostility, Israel has chosen to remain a member of this body. And then I remember that Israel has chosen to remain in this institution because it's important to stand up for yourself. Israel must stand up for its own survival as a nation, but it also stands up for the ideals of freedom and human dignity that the United Nations is supposed to be about. Standing here today, being forced to defend sovereignty and the integrity of my country, the United States of America,
USA,
many of the
USA,
same thoughts
USA.
have come to mind. The United States is by far the single largest contributor to the United Nations and its agencies. We do this in part in order to advance our values and our interests. When that happens, our participation in the UN produces great good for the world. Together, we feed, clothe, and educate desperate people. We nurture and sustain fragile peace in conflict areas throughout the world. And we hold outlaw regimes accountable. We do this because it represents who we are. It is our American way.
All right, so I'm going to stop that right there. There's still a lot to go, but I'm just going to stop that right there. So we're going to table a topic of like individual foreign aid for a second, and we're just going to talk about what she's talking about right now is the U.S. funding the UN. So I found this thing, U.S. funding of the United Nations reaches an all-time high. This is from heritage.org. It's from a guy named Brett Schaefer. This was written in 2010. So this is the Obama administration. Okay, hold on, wait a minute. I need to print it out big enough, so I need something to help me keep track of what line I'm on. Let me lube up here. The source and amount of all U.S. funding to the myriad number of organizations affiliated with the United Nations are difficult to track accurately. I'm just not ready. This difficulty prompted Congress to pass legislation requiring the administration to report annually on U.S. contributions to the UN. A recent report to Congress by the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, on all U.S. fundings to the UN system revealed that the U.S. contributions to the UN system reached record levels in the fiscal year of 2009. Considering budget trends, U.S. contributions will continue to rise, having an accurate amount of U.S. contributions to the UN available, particularly considering recent revelations about institutional weakness in UN oversight. Congress should take action to make the current OMB reporting requirement permanent. The U.S. funding of the UN system. The U.S. has been the largest financial supporter of the UN since the organization's founding in 1945. The U.S. is currently assessed 22% of the UN regular budget and more than 27% of the UN's peacekeeping budget. In dollar terms, the administration's budget for 2011 requested $516.3 million for the UN regular budget and more than $2.182 billion for the peacekeeping budget. However, God, Jesus. However, the U.S. also provides assessed financial contributions to other UN organizations and voluntary contributions to many more UN organizations. According to the OMB, total U.S. Contributions to the UN system were more than $6.347 billion in fiscal year 2009. This is more than $1 billion more total contributions as compiled by OMB for fiscal year 2005, and it's indicative of the rising budgetary trends in the UN and the consequential demands on U.S. Financial support. This is extremely unlikely because the UN regular budget and peacekeeping budget were each expanding rapidly over the period, and U.S. contributions to these two particular budgets are assessed mandatory rather than voluntary. Indeed, other budget documents at the State Department indicated that the U.S. contributions to the peacekeeping and the UN regular budget during this period were higher than the amount stated. The U.S. State Department reported that I got to redo this thing for this next one, on U.S. contributions to the UN in fiscal year 2006 and 2007. Unsurprisingly, the most recent State Department report indicated that the U.S. contributions jumped nearly 50% over 2007 to $6.9 billion in fiscal year 2008, led by nearly $2 billion increase in contributions from the State Department and other international programs. Distrust in the accuracy of the State Department report led Congress to designate OMB as the administration agency to compile and submit the report and for it to be made publicly available on the internet. The OMB released its report. Oh, this is a lot better. I should just do it this way. Released its report in fiscal year 2009, the U.S. contributions to the UN in June 2010. The report revealed that the U.S. provided $6.347 billion to the UN system in fiscal year 2009, including over $4 billion from the State Department, over $1.7 billion from U.S. aid, and $245 million from the Department of Agriculture, and tens of millions more from the Department of Health and Human Services, Labor, and Energy. What are we doing? This is an all-time record in U.S. Financial contributions to the UN system, but considering recent budget trends in the UN, the record is likely to be broken in 2010. This information comes at a time when trust in the capability and willingness of the UN to monitor and oversee its activities to prevent mismanagement, corruption, and waste is at a particularly low ebb. In July 2010, an internal memo. Oh, here we go. An internal memo by Inga Britt Elsenhuis, a Swedish auditor whose non-renewable 5-year term as Undersecretary General of the Office of Internal Oversight Services had ended, charged the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and his associates of undermining efforts to combat corruption in the organization. So when she's talking about how much money we give the UN, like, it's nothing to sneeze about. You know, in 2010 they're saying that it was, 20% of one of their 22% of one of their budgets, 27% of their peacekeeping budgets. Out of how many? There's at least. I mean, I don't know how many countries are in the UN, but there's a shitload of countries, bros. A fucking shitload of them. I could Google search it right now if I wanted to, but I'm just trying to get through all this. There's a shitload, and we're paying 22%. Well, we were back then. We were paying 22% of their regular everyday just walking around budget and 27% of their peacekeeping budget, which is all troops, equipment, food for troops, logistics for troops, medical care for the troops. That's an insane amount of fucking shit to be paying for. Especially when they just whip out their dicks and smack it around on our faces like this. Oh, well, they're going to. Like, we haven't got there yet. Hold on. So we're going to go back to UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. Here we go.
But we'll be honest with you. When we make generous contributions to the UN, we also have a legitimate expectation that our goodwill is recognized and respected. When a nation is singled out for attack in this organization, that nation is disrespected. What's more, that nation is asked to pay for the privilege of being disrespected. In the case of the United States, we are asked to pay more than anyone else for that dubious privilege. Unlike in some UN member countries, the United States government is answerable to its people. As such, we have an obligation to acknowledge when our political and financial capital is being poorly spent. We have an obligation to demand more for our investment. And if our investment fails, we have an obligation to spend our resources in more productive ways. Those are the thoughts that come to mind when we consider the resolution before us today. The arguments about the President's decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem have already been made. They are by now well known. The decision was in accordance to U.S. law dating back to 1995, and its position has been repeatedly endorsed by the American people ever since. The decision does not prejudge any final status issues, including Jerusalem's boundaries. The decision does not preclude a two-state solution if the parties agree to that. The decision does nothing to harm peace efforts. Rather, the President's decision reflects the will of the American people and our right as a nation to choose the location of our embassy. There is no need to describe it further. Instead, there is a larger point to make. The United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our right as a sovereign nation. We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations. And we will remember it when so many countries come calling on us, as they so often do, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit. America will put our embassy in Jerusalem. That is what the American people want us to do, and it is the right thing to do. No vote in the United Nations will make any difference on that. But this vote will make a difference on how Americans look at the UN and on how we look at countries who disrespect us in the UN. And this vote will be remembered. Thank you.
All right. So what does she say here? What does that sound like she's saying to you? It sounds like she's saying to me, like, look, from this point forward, fuckers, we're starting to keep score. We're going to keep score, fools. The results of the vote, well, I'll say I chose a CNN article to recap the results. And the reason I chose the CNN article is because of how fucking stupid it is. So I'm going to take a quick break real quick, and we'll get back to this article. And we'll see how the UN voted against us, or voted for the condemnation of moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Despite Haley threat, UN votes to condemn Trump's Jerusalem decision. This was from CNN. Nicole Gaiute. It was written today, 12/22/17. The United Nations voted overwhelmingly to condemn President Donald Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, despite threats from the U.S. to pull funding from the world body. Some 128 countries voted for the resolution, while 9 voted no. So it went from 1 to 9. And 35 nations rightly played it straight and abstained, including Canada, Mexico, and Australia. The vote came after U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley issued a direct threat saying that the U.S. will think twice about funding the world body if voted to condemn Trump's decision. Quote, the United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in this assembly, unquote, Haley said. Quote, we will remember it when we are called upon once again to make the world's largest contribution, unquote, to the UN, and when other members, nations ask Washington, quote, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit, unquote. I know I'm reading into this or whatever, but like to me, when I listen to her speech or whatever, and I'm just like watching her do this, it's like it's just her going like, fuck, hold on, god damn it, how fast can I do this without being an asshole? It's just her going, and you over there, what would you do with the Zika virus before we went over there? You'd have villages full of waterhead babies by now. And you, when your fucking third world shithole gets hit by a tsunami, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna vote against us? Who's gonna come and fucking help you? And you motherfucker over there. She's just like, a new sheriff's in town. Had to find my spot. And Haley said the U.S. will put the embassy in Jerusalem regardless of the vote. That's what the American people want us to do, and it's the right thing to do, Haley said. The vote will make a difference on how Americans look at the UN, she said. And this vote will be remembered. Haley's remarks followed a threat from Trump himself, who mentioned the UN vote at a Wednesday cabinet meeting. He said, quote, we're watching those votes, unquote. And the president said, let them vote against us. We'll save a lot. We don't care. Later Thursday, an invitation was sent around to 64 countries in addition to the U.S. that did not support the resolution on Jerusalem to attend a reception with Haley in January. The event was labeled as a means to thank the countries for their friendship with the United States. According to a copy of the invite obtained by CNN, which means that has no valid credibility at all, print it if you have it. Whenever I think of CNN, I just think of that all the fake news videos. I'm pretty sure I posted it up on the Abercast page on Facebook where the guy's like pretending he's like in front of a green screen and he's like pretending he's in Baghdad, and he's like, it's a Scud missile attack, like he's like rehearsing all the shit he's gonna fucking say. Few countries seemed cowed as a nation after nation blasted the U.S. at the emergency session of the UN General Assembly, condemning the Jerusalem decision as illegal, destabilizing, and a violation of international laws. Haley, no, these people are wrong. It went from one no vote to one no, from one no to 9 no's, and 35 nations abstained from voting at all. Pussies. Haley's stance also provoked a fiery tweet from John Brennan. Now, do you guys know who John Brennan is? He was the CIA director under President Obama. He tweeted, Trump admin threat to retaliate against nations that exercise sovereign right in UN to oppose U.S. position in Jerusalem is beyond outrageous. Shows at real Donald Trump expects blind loyalty and subservience from everyone. Qualities usually found in narcissistic, vengeful autocrats. Meanwhile, so this guy was in charge. This guy was in charge of protecting your nation. This CIA director was in charge of protecting you. He was the director of the fucking CIA. Listen to this fucking lily-livered, fucking yellow-bellied, fucking cunt. Trump admin threatened to retaliate against nations that exercise sovereign rights in U.S. to oppose U.S. position in Jerusalem is beyond outrageous. It shows that the real Donald Trump expects blind loyalty and subservience from everybody. You know, he's not saying blind loyalty. He's saying look, you're in the UN, you're paying for a huge, vast majority of the UN. You're fucking funding the UN. That should give you a little bit of fucking political leeway. And all he's saying is, we're going to start keeping score right now. We're going to start keeping score. You don't want to play the politics games of it? Then get the fuck out of my way. Then be a pussy and vote, abstain your fucking vote. You want to vote? Yeah? It's going to be on. Next time your fucking shithole country gets some kind of fucking earthquake, we were like, well, remember December 21st. I mean, we fucking told you. This is the game, dude. This is the game. And we're going to get into, like, what these people, like, their fucking, like, whatevers that they are going to, like, their excuses or, like, their condemnations. It makes me want to fucking run out there and punch some people. Makes me want to go out there and fucking punch some people. John Brennan is the first in line. The U.S. was joined in its no vote by Israel, a slew of small nations, including Micronesia, Nauru, Togo, and Tonga, Palau, the Marshall Islands, Guatemala, and Honduras. Other abstainers included the Czech Republic, Poland, Hungary, Croatia, the south of Sudan. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked Trump, and the countries that abstained in a statement issued shortly after the vote. You got to turn the page. Israel rejects this decision of the United States, and at the same time, we show gratitude to a high number of countries that abstained from the resolution. Netanyahu said Israel thanks President Trump on his unequivocal position in favor of Jerusalem and thanks other countries that voted together with Israel, together with the truth. In the aftermath, Haley's office said that the support the U.S. did get counted as a victory of sorts, pointing out that 9 countries voted against, 35 countries abstained, and 21 were absent. While the resolution passed, the vote breakdown tells a different story. A spokesman for the U.S. mission said, it's clear that many countries prioritize their relationship with the United States over an unproductive attempt to isolate us for a decision that was our sovereign right to make. Before the vote, at least one world leader took the time to call out Trump directly. Turkish President whoever, Yada Erdogan, the Turkish President said a self-styled leader of a greater Muslim world blasted President Trump during a speech in Ankara on Thursday. Mr. Trump, you cannot buy Turkey's democratic free will with your dollars. How much money do we send Turkey in foreign aid? That's what I want to know right now. Tell me. Of course, I don't know the answer to this. Our decision is clear. Burker thundered. What is the cradle of democracy doing? Burka said. Together, they are looking for people that they can buy with their dollars. And he issued an appeal with other world leaders saying, "Do not, for the sake of a few dollars, sell off your democratic free will," says the leader of a Muslim nation, Turkmenistan. State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert said the U.S. would explore various options following the UN vote. Nauert said the White House, with the NSC, told the State Department on Thursday afternoon that the president's foreign policy team had been empowered to explore various options going forward with other nations. However, no decisions have been made. Nauert also said that the UN vote is really not the only factor an administration would like to take into consideration in dealing with our foreign relations. But at least one UN analyst had said that the U.S. threats about funding had an element of political theater about them. Noting these fucking people, they don't understand. They don't get it. Political theater. They don't know who they're dealing with. Noting that it would be hard for the U.S. to pull support from countries such as Yemen, Pakistan, or Afghanistan. And the threats weren't likely to sway votes. On issues relating to Palestinians, the U.S. and Israel always find themselves in the minority, or with a handful of other friends, like the Marshall Islands, in the face of overwhelming majorities in the General Assembly, said Richard Gowan, a New York-based UN expert at the European Council of Foreign Relations. And despite the threats from Trump, there's safety in numbers for most members of the UN. Fucking turn that place into a parking lot, Gowan said. That was my sidebar. Smaller countries, poorer countries may get a little nervous when they hear President's rhetoric, said Gowan, but they will also gain confidence that the big members of the Arab bloc are pretty much guaranteed to vote against the U.S. position as well as the Europeans. U.S. officials say the decision to recognize Jerusalem and move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv reflects the basic reality. Israel's seat of government sits in Jerusalem, says U.S. officials, who add their decision has no bearing on their final resolution of the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, or the fate of the holy sites of the world's largest three faiths. The fate of Jerusalem is so fraught, however, that it's considered, quote, final status, unquote, issue, only to be directed at the end of Israeli-Palestinian peace talks. No countries base their diplomatic mission in Jerusalem. As a result, apart from Israel, none of the U.S.'s closest allies spoke before the vote. No General Assembly resolution will ever drive us from Jerusalem, said Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon. Sounds like a total fake Marvel name. The United States simply stated a fact. They officially declare that it's always been true. Jerusalem has always been and always will be the capital of Israel. Those who support this resolution are like puppets, Danon says. Puppets controlled by the strings of your Palestinian masters. Hold on. I'm going to read that again because it's hilarious. I wish I could do a Cobra Commander voice. Those who support this resolution are like puppets, Danon said. Puppets controlled by the strings of your Palestinian masters. Otherwise, speaker after speaker of the UN emphasized U.S. isolation, with the Palestinian representative declaring that the decision destroyed Washington's ability to act as a mediator in the peace talks, and left it with few allies by its side. What does this decision serve? Asked Ambassador Bloop Bloop Bardu Burp. It serves the Israeli government in implementing its colonial plans. It serves the powers of extremism. Blink, blink. Does the U.S. Not wonder why it stands isolated? Yeah, it's because we're surrounded by enemies. Mansour asked. and why even its closest allies couldn't turn a blind eye to this decision. The world is not for sale, said Venezuela Representative UN Samuel Moncada Acosta, and your threats imperil global peace. I can't even read the rest of this shit. Knowing is half the battle. This decision is an outrageous assault on universal values. Back to Turkey. Turkey's foreign minister, Melvet Cavusoglu, said, "You can be strong, but this doesn't make you right." Milaha Lodi, the Pakistani representative to the UN, said, "We regret and reject this decision. We must uphold the prevalent and time-honored norms, both legal and moral," she said. The world, I was thinking it was some dude, like some old crusty dude with a big beard and a turban. I guess it could still be that. The world will not be complicit in illegal activity. Turkey co-sponsored with Yemen the draft of the resolution, which calls on all countries to refrain from establishing diplomatic missions in Jerusalem. Any decisions that alerts the character, status, or demographic composition of Jerusalem should, quote, have no legal effect, are null and void, and must be rescinded in compliance with the relevant resolutions of the Security Council, unquote. It reads. Fuck. But you guys didn't think I was ever going to get done with that, huh? Yeah, me neither. All right, let me get back on track. Okay, so this kind of news cycle or whatever, this story really just reminded me a lot of, okay, so back in the 2000s, there was a comedian on TV named Dave Chappelle. Now, this was before President Obama got elected, so he did a skit, well, he did a series of skits making fun of the then President Bush, where it was called Black Bush. And it was basically if a black guy did all the things that President Bush did, how the media would crucify him. So, I mean, he's hilarious. The show is one of my favorite shows. I've seen them all a fucking million times. I quote them all the time. I love them to death. However, the reign of President Obama showed quite the opposite, that the fucking people bent over backwards to not question the black president at all. Of course, Black Bush, I guess, is being a Republican, where Obama was a commie. So, but anyhow, it reminded me, he did this while I'm reading and while I'm doing this research, and as I'm like watching Nikki Haley talking, it just reminded me of this show where the UN sanctions Black Bush, and he has something to say about it. Here we go.
UN, you have a problem with that? You know what you should do? You should sanction me. Sanction me with your army. Oh, wait a minute. You don't have an army. I guess that means you need to shut the fuck up. That's what I do if I don't have no army. I would fuck up. Shut the fuck up. That's right. Hopi, and I ain't think I'm going to take orders from an African. You might speak 16 languages, but you're going to need them when you in Times Square selling fake hats. I know Gucci.
Oh.
When I see it, nigga, I'm rich.
So what's the beef here? What do these countries in the UN have against Israel? Is there a UN bias against Israel? I don't know. I found an article that says, does the UN have an anti-Israeli bias, from June 2017 by Margaret Bashir. United Nations, the UN ambassador to the United Nations, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations put the organization's Human Rights Council on notice Tuesday. This is Nikki Haley, and she fucking does this shit all the time. I'm just going to start calling her future president Nikki Haley, saying that needs to reform or the U.S. will withdraw from it. This is just fucking 6 months ago. Nikki Haley, who's also a member of President Donald Trump's cabinet, has been very vocal about what she says is the 47-member Geneva-based council's biased against Israel. Quote, since its creation, the council has passed more than 70 resolutions targeting Israel, unquote, Haley told the Graduate Institute in Geneva. Quote, it has passed just 7 on Iran, 70-7. That's criminal, son. Quote, this relentless pathological campaign against a country that actually has a strong human rights record makes a mockery not of Israel but of the council itself, unquote. Haley said to cynical laughter from the audience when she spoke of Israel's human rights record. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley waves to the crowd before she speaks at the 2017 American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee. The AIPAC policy conference held at the Verizon Center in Washington, March 27th, 2017. Haley also has criticized the UN generally for having an anti-Israel bias. Quote, nowhere in the UN's failure has been more consistent and more outrageous than its bias against our close ally Israel, unquote, Haley told the U.S. Senate confirmation hearing in January. Now remember, this outrageous and consistent activity started in 1967 when the UN peacekeepers just left. Unilateral decision, just got up and walked out, took their peacekeepers and we're going home, God damn it, we're taking our ball with us and you can invade whatever country you want to, Sir President King Yabba Habba Israel has criticized internationally primarily for its treatment of Palestinians in the occupied territories, including the demolition of their homes, the expansion of Israeli settlements, and the treatments of Palestinian prisoners. But despite the criticism, it has never faced UN-imposed sanctions for its actions. Now they're saying this thing where they're like occupied territories, expansion of Israeli settlements. Those expansions have taken place during war, when you are allowed to take stuff. You could take your enemy's stuff and you could be like, fuck you, bitch, your yard is now my yard. I won. It's called the spoils of war. It happens all the time. Except for us. We never take it. We never take anything. We let everybody have all their shit back. It might be a little scorched. It might be a little irradiated, but you can have your shit back, everybody. While Israel regularly decries its treatment in the United Nations, has not deterred it from campaigning for a seat on the powerful 15-nation Security Council for 2019-2020. Anti-Israel bias? ? In December, the UN Council adopted a resolution by a vote of 14-0 that said Israeli settlements violate international law. International law and are a major obstacle in achieving a two-state solution. The United States, under the Obama administration, chose to abstain instead of blocking the measure. That's the thing that she was just talking about in that first clip that I played you guys. That's this whole fucking thing right here is what she was talking about. Quote, this puts Israel in a poor negotiating position, is extremely unfair to all Israelis. Unquote. Then President-elect Trump said in a statement criticizing this resolution. Israel said it would ignore the resolution and has continued to announce its new settlements. Israel faces a lot of prejudice across the UN system, said Richard Gowan. We just heard from this fucking guy, too. The UN expert at the European Council on Foreign Relations, a.k.a. the Illuminati, quote, but it is actually in a very strong position where it matters most, the Security Council. Quote, the U.S. virtually always stands up for Israel in Security Council debates, which matter far more than most of the huffing and puffing that goes on in the General Assembly or the Human Rights Council, Gowan added. J Street, a U.S. advocacy and lobbying group that refers to itself as pro-Israeli and pro-peace, says there is a long record of bias against Israel at the UN. Quote, it undermines people's confidence in the UN's fairness and its ability to do its job. It undermines the UN's ability to actually play a productive role related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the real issue around it, said Logan Bayroft, J Street Associate Director of Communications. He said his organization wants to see the UN and its bodies play a constructive role in calling attention to problems on both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and in advocating for a two-state solution. They're still with this two-state solution. 70 years has been. As long as there's a sense of bias and obsessive focus, it does inhibit the UN's capacity to do that, he added. From Geneva, Ambassador Haley will travel to Israel for a 3-day visit. She's expected to meet with both Israeli and Palestinian leaders. J Street's Brayoff said Haley needs to deliver very clear, unequivocal support for a two-state solution, which the Trump administration has yet to declare. So is it a bias, or is there a war? Is the UN have a war against Israel? Well, I found this op-ed from March 31st, which is my birthday, everybody, in 2015, called The UN's War on Israel. United Nations. The United Nations is celebrating its 70th anniversary this year. It was intended to be a temple of peace. Limbaugh calls it the bar scene from Star Wars. This is no, that turns into the Muppet song every time I do it. Ever since I was a little kid, I can't. Now it's the Muppet song stuck in my head. But this once great global body has been overrun by the repressive regimes that violate human rights and undermine international security. In 1949, when the United Nations admitted Israel as a member state, it had 58 member countries and about half had a democratic orientation. Today, the landscape of the organization has changed. The strings being pulled by the Palestinian puppet masters drastically from 51 member states at its founding in 1945. The institution has grown to 193 members, fewer than half of which are democracies. The very nations that deny democratic rights to their peoples abuse at the United Nations democratic forums to advance their interests. The largest of these groups compromise members from 120 member strong bloc known as the Non-Aligned Movement. You got to really watch out for these names. When people name themselves the Non-Aligned Movement, it seems like there's 120 of them and they're aligned. Since 2012, the bloc has been chaired by Iran. Oh my God, that's another thing you got to look at. These fucking cavemen fucking are in charge of shit. Which has used its position to bolster its allies and marginalize Israel. In March, the United Nations closed the annual meeting of its Commission on the Status of Women by publishing a report that effectively singled out just one country for condemnation, Israel. The Commission apparently had nothing to say about the Sudanese girls who are subject to female genital mutilation. It's my favorite heavy metal band. It also had nothing to say about the Iranian women who have been punished for crimes of adultery by stoning. These oversights may have something to do with the fact that both Iran and Sudan sit on the 45-member commission. Then there's the United Nations Human Rights Council, the body that replaced the Council on Human Rights in 2006. Its membership includes Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Venezuela, nations where you risk life and liberty if you express dissenting opinions. Yet the government stand in judgment of the rest of us. In 2007, Sudan chaired a committee to overseeing human rights, even as its president, Omar Hassan al-Bashir, was being investigated for crimes of genocide and crimes against humanity in Darfur, for which, I'm sorry for laughing, it's just ludicrous. This is the fucking guy who's in charge of this commission? I mean, this is the country that's in charge of this commission, and his president, Omar Hassan al-Bashir, was being investigated for crimes of genocide. All right, for which the International Criminal Court later issued arrest warrants. Saudi Arabia, a regime notorious for public executions and floggings, like that most recently of the blogger Rahif Badwa, sits on the Human Rights Council despite regularly receiving the worst possible ratings on civil liberties and political rights from the independent watchdog Freedom House. In 2013, Iran was elected to the committee responsible for disarmament. I'm going to read that again before I go forward, and let me know if you can figure out what's wrong with this. In 2013, Iran was elected to the committee responsible for disarmament. ... Even as it has continued its nuclear expansion, support for terrorism, and the destruction of Israel. Last year, the Iranian served as vice chair for the Grand Assembly's legal committee in an inexplicable choice, given that Iranian citizens are routinely denied due process and fair trials. Knowing this history, perhaps we shouldn't be surprised that in 2014-15 session alone, the General Assembly adopted about 20 resolutions critical of Israel, while the human rights situations in Iran, Syria, and North Korea merited just one condemnation apiece. Day after day, member states turn a blind eye to the most deplorable crimes. Iran, just one hostile resolution for a nation that on average executes its citizens at a rate of 2 a day for, quote, crimes, unquote, that include homosexuality, apostasy, and the vague offense of being an enemy of God. And then, you're going to be an enemy of God. And then all of a sudden, North Korea, just one negative resolution, even though it has imprisoned more than 200,000 citizens, throws children into forced labor camps, and subjects its population to food shortages and famine as a result of government policies. Syria, you may ask? Question mark again? Just one resolution for a government that has pursued a war against its own people that has caused the deaths of at least 2,200,000 men, women, and children, many by torture, starvation, chemical weapons, barrel bombs dropped on markets and schools. Christians now numbering among the world's most persecuted religious groups in Muslim countries, yet this human rights crisis almost completely ignored by the United Nations. Instead, Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East and in the area in the region where Christian population is actually growing, often seems to be the only nation in the United Nations that cares about. Nowhere is the anti-Israel bias more obvious than the Geneva-based Human Rights Council. This council addresses the human rights abuse of all countries in the world under a program known as Agenda Item 4. That is, all countries but one. Israel is the only nation that is singled out for criticism by virtue of a special program known as Agenda Item 7. A result, according to the Geneva-based monitoring group UN Watch, is more than 50% of all condemnatory resolutions are directed at the Jewish state. Following last summer's conflict in Gaza, the Human Rights Council established a commission of inquiry and selected William Shabbos, a Canadian law professor, to chair the investigation. In February, Mr. Shabbos was forced to resign after the documents came to light revealing that in 2012 he had done consulting work for the PLO, that's the Palestine Liberation Organization. Surprisingly, this fact had slipped Mr. Shabbos' mind during his vetting process. It is clear that from the outset that Mr. Shabbos was not impartial arbiter, since he had the record of public statements suggesting that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the former President Shimon Peres would face trial at the International Criminal Court when Israel protested. However, the United Nations ignored it. I am often asked how I could stand the tide of hatred aimed at Israel. Our response to the United Nations accusations is to speak tirelessly for those who are denied a voice in most of the Middle East, women, minorities, the LGBT community, and to fight daily efforts by totalitarian regimes to undermine democratic societies. Based on the fact that Israel is a thriving society, I believe we are winning. Later this year, chairmanship of the non-aligned movement will transfer to Venezuela, Iran's ally, for the foreseeable future, and we can expect more of the same. The problem with the United Nations is that the leaders of many of its member states do not rule with the consent of the governed. Instead, they use the body as a forum to deflect attention from their own ruthless rule. In doing so, they turn a stage of courageous statecraft into a tragic theater of the absurd. And the puppets that dance there, their strings are pulled by the Palestinian puppet masters. My God, I've been talking forever. I'm not even nearly halfway with these things. All right, so, I mean, what do you guys think? Do you think that the UN, by virtue of whatever, is has a war or has a bias against Israel? You know, it seems to me like it does, but what do I know? I'm just a writer with a podcast. I'd like to encourage you guys to support the show. Please rate and review on iTunes. Please spread the disease. That is, if you are a weirdo that likes the stuff we talk about on the show, to tell some other weirdo about the show. And go ahead and grab some books. That's the best way to support the show. Write something, draw something, record something, bros. Oh, I forgot to mention, I have a call out for musicians for the decompression portion of the show. I'm looking for some indie music, guys, so...
Stigmata Studios presents The Scorpion Strikes. In this comic book, a terrorist called the Scorpion is transported to a secret CIA prison. He quickly turns the tables on the guards and administrators and releases the prisoners. A well-armed anarchist called Constituent Zero assembles a team and fights to take the prison back. The story is a dark political action thriller. The Scorpion's actions set the stage perfectly for the Jin Jihad. Available on Indie Planet. Get more info on The Scorpion Strikes, the Jin Jihad, and other titles at stigmatastudios.com. Stigmata Studios presents The Test of the Scorpion. In this comic book, while the Jin Jihad is raging on one side of the city, the terrorist called the Scorpion sets a secondary attack in motion as he obtains a small tactical nuclear bomb. A mysterious, ever-living warrior called Cyrus the Dead Guy steps forward to test the faith of the Scorpion and his lunatic followers. This is an action-adventure story. It's a bit of swashbuckler that wraps up the Jihad stories. Available on Indie Planet. Get more info on The Scorpion Strikes, the Jin Jihad, The Test of the Scorpion, and other titles at stigmatastudios.com.
Why don't you help me out? I got like 0 so far, so come on. Come on. I promise I'll put some links in the show notes, and I won't sing over your music like I do when I got Soda Jerk on there. Anyhow, I'm going to peace out here. I want you guys to remember to have a fun and safe holiday. You know, be it Kwanzaa or Christmas or Hanukkah or Saturnalia or the solstice, whatever you guys float your boat, whatever gets you off. Merry, happy, spectacular, super duper that. And also I want to remind you guys to have a plan, bros. Have a plan. The cops are looking for you at this time of year, and don't fucking fuck it up. Get an Uber, get a Lyft, get a taxi. Have your wife drive. That's what I do. So go ahead and do that. We're going to hear from Black Bush one more time, and then I'm going to get into a special decompression song for you guys. I'm going to do the Bill O'Reilly Freak Out dubstep. So here we go. What, you speak 16 languages? You're going to need them when you're in Times Square selling fake hats. I know what Gucci looks like.
UN, you have a problem with that? You know what you should do? You should sanction me. Sanction me with your army. Oh, wait a minute. You don't have an army. I guess that means you need to shut the fuck up. That's what I do if I don't have no army. I would fuck up. Shut the fuck up. That's right. copium. Now, you think I'm gonna take orders from an African? You might speak 16 languages, but you gonna need them when you in Times Square selling fake hats. I know Gucci when I see it, nigga. I'm rich. UN, you have a problem with that? You know what you should do? You should sanction me. Sanction me with your army. Oh, wait a minute. You don't have an army. I guess that means you need to shut the fuck up. That's what I do if I had an army. I would fuck up.
Shut the fuck up.
That's right. Copium. Now, you think I'm gonna take orders from an African? You might speak 16 languages, but you gonna need them when you in Times Square selling fake hats. I know Gucci when I see it, nigga. I'm rich.
All right. You guys stay tuned. This Sunday, like I said, Christmas special coming at your face. Thanks again for tuning in. I love everybody, especially you.
That's tomorrow. And that is it for us today. Okay, I don't know
what that is.
Whatever it is, it's not right on the teleprompter. I don't know what that is. I've never seen that. Okay, but yeah, I can't read it. There's no words on it.
Okay.
There's no words there to play us out. What does that mean? To play us out?
Sting is going to do its video. Sting video.
What is
for credits?
I don't know what that means. To play us out. What does that mean? To end the show?
Yeah.
All right, go.
Yeah. 5, 4, 3.
That's tomorrow, and that is it for us today. And we will leave you with I can't do it. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Fucking thing sucks. We'll do it live. Fucking thing sucks. Fucking thing sucks. Fucking thing sucks. Fuck! That's tomorrow, and that is it for us today. And we will leave you with I can't do it. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Fucking thing sucks. We'll do it live. Fucking thing sucks. Fucking thing sucks. Fucking thing sucks.